Welcome to today's episode of How Women Inspire Us. Our guest today is really such an incredibly special and powerful leader for all of us, and I can't wait for you to get to know her. She is a public and private company board director today, but she started her journey after retiring from the Department of Defense. She served as the CIO and the CISO, the CISO, and as a board director and advisor today, she advises on cybersecurity, information management, IT, digital resiliency, information assurance, and risk. Extremely critical, top of mind issues for all companies today. So right on time leader that people are so lucky to have by their side. She's also a highly sought after leader with a global network of highly specialized and strategic partnerships with government and industry. She focuses her time really on mentoring and coaching emerging leaders. It is such a gift to have you, Essye Miller, with us today. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you, Julie. I'm excited to be with you and honored that you asked me to join you today.
Okay, Essye, so what does the CIO play when she's having a tough day or day to celebrate? What's your music selection on those moments of celebration?
Corinne Hawthorne, who is a Christian artist, sings the song titled Unstoppable. I can be who I want, do what I want, go as hard as I want, and it doesn't matter what anybody else says because God's got us. And, I had an amazing career, but there were often times when people, they question whether or not we need to be or are qualified to be in a seat.
Yeah.
And I had to get to the point to know that, I deserve to be there. And, oh, by the way, I'm unstoppable.
I love that. You said it's a Christian song. Is that an important part of the story for you? Is that an important part of your drumbeat?
My faith is a huge, very foundational for me. And it made it much easier in time to deal with the difficult times because you don't get so caught up in the minutia because you realize life is so much bigger.
I mean, we've all seen those movies that I kind of have an idea of what like your day-to-day job has to do with. And I can imagine it's nothing like that. But I would think you would be challenged with ethical issues constantly in the role that you had for so long. And it certainly always comes up when you're running stuff and dealing with human beings. But
right. And being challenged at every turn, but knowing that you've got a huge responsibility, not just to the people that are working for you, but to the nation. And that's amazing.
Thank you for your service and for everything you did to protect us and make sure that none of us know the hard stuff you had to do, I'm sure, which is sort of a secret, right? So you had this major government role, and then you at the Department of Defense, and then you transferred your sort of career focus to really supporting public and private company boards. Can you talk a little bit about what that transition looked like?
Well, after 35 years with the Department of Defense, time with the Air Force, the Army, and the Office of Secretary of Defense, I hit a time when I knew there was nothing else in the department that I wanted to do, which meant it was time for me to go on to other things. And I just didn't know what that looked like. And I had a couple of CEOs and very senior industry partners say, hey, you should consider board work, both public and private. Julie, I didn't really know what that meant or what that looked like, and began to really explore. And it fell right into my wheelhouse because I wanted to continue to make a difference and invest in both people and mission and technology. And doing board work gives me an opportunity to do just that. Don't have to worry about the operations and the day-to-day mission, but the broader strategy of just getting things done.
Well, so when we hear now sort of what your area of focus is, when you do your board work, it's like, oh yeah, that's exactly what boards need today. I can't imagine though, that it was an easy transition to go, from not, did you ever work in the private sector in significant ways?
No
Yeah,
private sector.
so that's sort of like, often that's sort of like the disqualifier, right? So
right.
How did you actually reposition yourself? And was there anyone or anything instrumental in helping you get there?
I had to begin to think about it differently because when you step back, some of the same tenets that boards are looking for, senior leaders in government are responsible for as well when it comes to governance and talent management and managing risk. All of those things are the same. We just talk about them differently. We don't talk about profit and loss, but we manage huge budgets to deliver mission and capability to the nation. And I had to learn how to move the acronyms out of the way and make it real talk for people that I was talking to. But I have to tell you, it was talking to Nancy Shepard after going through the board readiness program when it really became real for me because I had had some amazing board interviews and I learned I approached them more as job interviews because that's the way we were raised.
Yeah.
You know, here are my qualifications, here's what you're looking for, here's how it fits. And that is not what a board is looking for. And had that real aha moment when Nancy reminded me, hey, you're interviewing them as much as they're interviewing you because fit is important. So I had to learn to interpret all of the accomplishments from government into more industry and broader speak so that folks could really understand the value that I brought to the table. And we're called senior executive service members in government. Most industry people don't know what that is, but they all know who a general officer is. You got stars and a very visible indication of who they are. You don't have that with the civilian force. So we have to make sure people understand what we do and how we operate within government.
So you just said you're interviewing them as well. Can you give us an example of what that looks like in practicality? So if I'm the person that you're talking to, sort of what might be some of the questions you might ask?
I want to know about your culture, the culture of the company, how you're engaging with your people. I want to know about the dynamics among the board members. You know, are you really open to conversation and input from the board, or are there certain dynamics that we need to deal with? Are there values of the company that align with things that are important for me? And I had to learn how to ask those questions and that it was okay to ask that because I found chemistry was very important to me.
So do you feel like there are other sort of ways that people, you would say, if you were giving me advice and I'm a government, someone who's been in high level, obviously high level government role, you know, anything else in terms of translating my experience into board related terms? Are there any specific hooks that you've heard, like trends or words that, you know, people are looking for? So people can listen to this and it can be practical.
Again, I go back to, we all do governance. We're all responsible for policy, strategy. Of course, cybersecurity and risk are really, really big right now.
Yeah.
And instead of talking to that from a military term or government term, interpret that language such that industry understands.
Yeah.
But the other benefit, Julie, is most industry partners are trying to do business with government.
Yes.
And helping them understand where that technology aligns with the need is very important as well.
So you're almost like a translator in both ways. You're translating your own experience back to them, and then you help them actually.
Exactly.
Yeah. All right, good. Now we got to add that to your list of your bio of professional translator. So you said a couple industry people sort of nudged you originally, and you said Nancy Shepard, who's been she's every, you know, so many board journeys go back to Nancy Shepard and how women lead board readiness. But how did you build your network of support? Who were your champions, and what was the most effective strategy in making sure that they could help you get to that next spot?
I first had to learn it was okay to tell people that I was looking for board opportunities. And early on, I was wondering, why is nobody calling? Why am I not hearing from anyone? And I had a CEO say, Essye, they don't know you're there. They don't know you're looking. So you've got to share with people, which was great because when I went through the board readiness program, you talk about being just unapologetically visible in what you want. And I got to a point where it was just easy. If I was doing a public speaking engagement and I find somewhere to just bring in, and I'm on that board journey. So if you guys know something, here I am.
Yeah.
Just getting to the point to advocate for myself, both in my inner circle and more publicly as well.
Yeah. And was that phone calls? I always say, get your list of 25 ready. Did you have like your regular touch base list?
I had those folks that I considered coaches and advocates in the process, but I also learned the value of LinkedIn
Hmm.
and social media because a fair amount of my early calls were just cold calls from recruiters who had either seen my LinkedIn profile or someone had referred them to me and they used LinkedIn to find me.
But you probably had all kinds of restrictions on your social media presence when you were in your leadership role, right? I think
Exactly.
of all people,
Exactly.
you had to
And,
be.
and LinkedIn was a no-no to me for
I
so long.
bet. I
So I had
bet.
to get myself to a point where, it's okay to put a foot out there and then getting help in crafting my message and my digital presence was important as well.
Okay, let's talk a little bit about that. So if you were to say like, do the following 5 things, hire someone to redo your LinkedIn, like what would you say are the things that today and that is the roadmap for people to get present if you couldn't be visible before?
First thing I'd say is take that government resume and push it aside because folks on the
Start over.
outside don't use it exactly,
Mhm.
but bring that experience and the accomplishments forward, but also to have somebody to help you put it together.
Yeah.
I went through several iterations of both my bio, my LinkedIn profile, and my resume. I had to work through the right words and the messaging there.
Okay, so you get your LinkedIn repositioned, started, you get your story straight. You just mentioned also, so I always think you need to be able to Google somebody and see more than just their LinkedIn and
Mhm.
and you shouldn't have to find their LinkedIn on the 5th page of Google search either. So what are the other things that you would say, like, this helps a lot? Did you write any articles? Did you do speaking engagements?
My public speaking engagements were important. And it's interesting, as I was preparing to retire, I'll never forget an older industry bud said, hey, you need to make sure you're maximizing your last day with public speaking engagements and articles and things of that nature so that you're relevant as
Oh,
you leave.
good. Yeah.
And true enough, I found folks would go Google and they'd pull articles I'd forgotten I'd even written or interviewed for,
Yeah.
or had recorded speaking engagements that, we do it as a part of doing business, but you don't think about the value for future opportunities.
Indeed. All right. Well, that's critical. I feel like you just gave us brilliant gold. When you think about the mistakes that you've seen other people making when they approach job interviews, if you will, for board seats, are there any other tips that you can give us about do this, don't do that?
Of course, thinking broader and more strategically, knowing that you won't have a hands-on in the companies that you're talking about,
Yeah.
understanding where their challenge areas are and how you can help at the table. But also, Julie, realizing that you have a voice, because one of the questions I got that I didn't expect was, what are your passion areas? What are the things that you're interested in? And I found myself flat-footed because you don't think about that when you're going for an interview. So now it's really, really easy.
Okay. What do you tell people?
You know,
What's your thing?
travel. I want to travel. I continuing to learn. And it's funny, one recruiter said, hey, ask your son what he thinks your passion area. And there I go, ask a 21-year-old. So what do you think mom's passion area is? And he said, learning. Well, why do you say that? Because there are books all over the place and you're always reading. And I never thought about it that way.
Our sons are an interesting mirror for us. My son is 27. He recently said to me, he's like, Mom, I think I just realized you're a real person. Yes.
Exactly.
It doesn't matter what my resume is to him, I'm mom, but that makes you so human. Isn't that beautiful? I love that story. Your son's like everybody else's son and you're, running the world. I'm not asking for permission anymore. I'm not asking for a seat at the table. My friends, this is the first generation of us. We have a huge opportunity. We have power and influence and wealth. And we can start building the tables where we get the prime seats. Today, we want to invite you to join us as investors in venture. I know no one's asked you to do it before. It might be something that seems scary or foreign, but I promise you it's not that different than investing in a mutual fund where your retirement funds are. I want you to lean in and just learn a little bit more. How about making the commitment that in the next 12 months, you can give yourself 12 months to figure it out? and to take a step. I want to invite you to be part of the new table of power and influence and wealth. You're invited. I want to sit at the table with you because we're going to make big change. We're going to make the world we've been dreaming of. When I think about your specific area, it so beautifully coincides with everything everybody's talking about: cybersecurity, information management. It's critical right now in corporations. We're all feeling under attack in certain, or need to be on the defensive in terms of all of those areas. But when you think about other people working in government, the other sort of intersections or the other sort of things where you think like, hey, listen, someone who's been in government and run big stuff, you've clearly managed teams, et cetera. But what are the other things? Like, can you tell them that you can help them navigate the policy landscape, or otherwise, what can and can't you say?
One of the huge areas is in acquisition. Government acquires a lot from industry partners, but you have to understand those processes and acquisition rules and regulations that they're bound by. So helping to bridge that gap is huge. Also looking at it from a functional aspect. Just like most companies, the government we've got finance people, we have logistics folks, you have personnel, you have all of the same functional areas as most companies. And again, back to translating the type of work that we do and the outcome.
Can we pivot and talk about you as a woman and as a leader, and a little bit more just about you? What would you say are your sort of leadership tips and lessons? Sort of what is your cornerstone?
I watch and listen to understand who people are and use that as my way of engaging. I'm a huge collaborator, and which is important when you're working somewhere in the Pentagon and you've got all types of critical, difficult, complex problems that you're dealing with. Being able to build partnerships is very, very important. And then helping to grow that next generation of people coming up behind us was important as well. Yeah. So, but in order to do that, you've got to listen and understand what's happening around you and take your cues from that. The assumption is that you are technically proficient in whatever your area is, but it's those soft skills and the ability to deal with people who may think differently and look differently. That's very important. Now, I'll never forget when post-retirement, the female that used to sit next to me in the staff meetings with the Secretary of Defense said, hey, whenever you were in the chair next to me, I felt I had to sit taller, and I had to bring my A game. Julie, I didn't know she was watching. And you just never know what kind of example you are to the people that are around you.
Well, what you just described is, maybe this is why it was reasonably quick transition for you. You literally just described what you want in a boardroom, right? You want somebody who listens deeply, asks great questions, learns how to get consensus and coalition building and different stakes from what you did in your day job. But to me, like, you just named it. And I feel like the way you show up as a leader, I stand taller when I'm with you, but I also feel safe around you. If you're trustworthy, you are measured. The way you are as a leader is, well, it's fantastic. And it's a good recommendation. Everybody should watch how you hold yourself. If you ask me, if they want to, one, be better leaders and humans, but also think about board roles, because that's sort of all the critical stuff. So now you're in this other stage and you're on corporate boards and you're playing a different role, and your son is 21. What else are you doing? You said a little bit about travel, but like, how do you think about, is there impact? You're on a How Women Lead executive board. What is the impact you want to have? What do you want to, do in this next phase beyond the sort of corporate roles?
I want to help not just women, but government folks understand the value that they bring to this new environment. Yeah. And help tell that story and give them a safe space to learn. Okay. I love it when I get a phone call that says, hey, I'm thinking about board work. Can we talk about it? How did you get your paperwork done? What was your experience? Who are you talking to? Or even as simple, Julie, as, hey, consider advisory work. Yeah. Do an advisory board or two to get comfortable in that space and set yourself up for broader exposure. It goes back to that same tenet in government, helping that next generation grow and get a seat at the table.
And I kind of hate sometimes when people talk about balancing family and work, because it's never a balance. You're just doing the best you can to like take care of, prioritize things the way you feel like is right at the right time. But do you have any recommendations or tips for people as they think about sort of how to architect?
The first thing I tell the young ladies that I talk to is Superwoman doesn't exist.
Yeah.
We're not made to do it all, and we're not made to do it alone. And communication is key. I'll never forget when I decided I wanted to become an executive. I went and talked to one of the seniors in government. She thought I was there for mentoring. I said, no, my question is very different. I know you're a wife, you're a mother, you're an executive. How do you do it all? And her answer was quite simple: with help.
Yeah.
I had to rely on help. So I took that. My husband was a commercial airline pilot. So you had two very mobile, very busy people in the household. And oh, by the way, we decided to adopt our son. So as we're going through that process, what do these two professionals do? We got a baby. And we decided early on that one of us would always be home, which meant we had to manage our travel calendars a little bit differently. But it was amazing to do that because our son grew up knowing one of us would be around. And sometimes that meant making sacrifices. There may not have been evening events that I went to, or I dragged my husband along to those things that were important to me. But we'd make those decisions deliberately.
Yeah, lots of communication to be able to manage that. Yeah, that's
and sometimes you got to call grandparents and girlfriends and somebody to fill in that hole, but we can't be afraid to ask.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Essye. Such a packed in conversation, very instructive for people. If people want to find you, where do they find that LinkedIn that we just talked about?
On LinkedIn or Google me.
Okay. All right.
Email is even best at essyemiller@gmail. I said is the easiest way to get me. Always excited to hear from people and to help where I can.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for your commitment to helping other women make the same similar transition. You're the one who made it, if you will. So you're such a great example for women. And it's amazing to hear of your commitment to help more women cross
Thanks,
that.
Julie. Thanks for the opportunity to share.